Back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. Today we'll be continuing the adventure into the wonderful universe of Jago Litefoot as I take a look at their first ever Big Finish story, the companion chronicle, The Mahogany Murders, that is the equivalent of sort of the jewel in the crown when it comes to Big Finish releases, because this is the birth of Jago Litefoot as a spin-off, sort of aside from Doctor Who, that was released back in June 2009 as a part of the companion chronicle series. In case you haven't checked out already, I have previously reviewed the Talons of Weng-Chiang, and upcoming soon there will be reviews of Jago Litefoot Series 1, followed by Jago Litefoot Series 2, and so on, to sort of complete my Jago Litefoot review season and sort of take a look at the adventures in chronological order. So yeah, this is the first Big Finish release with them in, and to be honest, it is the prime example of why these two characters should be given a Big Finish spin-off, because even though this is their first story, I don't believe they had any intentions to actually carry it on further, but due to the success of this release and due to the characteristics of these two characters, they came back for a full 13 series, along with several Doctor Who stories. So yeah, they are a very powerful duo, and I'm very glad Big Finish gave them the opportunity to continue. To start off with, this release is available, of course, on the Big Finish website, as it is part of the Companion Chronicle series. The physical edition is $8.99, and the download version is $7.99. And if you are interested by what I say in this review, there is also the trailer that you can take a look at on the Big Finish website, along with the story details. All will be in the description below. This episode is written by Andy Lane, who is also the same person who writes these series finales to Jago Litefoot Series 2, and it is directed by Lisa Bauman, who of course is also Ellie Hickson within the series itself. Taking a look at the characters, as this is a companion chronicle, we only have two characters for this release, of course being Jago Litefoot themselves, played by Cressida Benjamin and Trevor Baxter. Then we also have the additional cameo of Ellie Hickson in there as well, played by Lisa Bauman, sort of for a few lines here and there as well, to sort of give the context of the Red Tavern. Now I must admit, I'm not one for the companion chronicle format. As you may have noticed on this channel, I've never reviewed a companion chronicle before, or a short trip, as opposed to the one Jago Litefoot one, and the second one that I'm going to be reviewing today is another Jago Litefoot one, so you can sort of tell if it's not a character that I'm completely invested in, kind of have to listen to it, I won't listen to it, because it's just something with the companion chronicles and me that I just not necessarily don't like. But I think with Big Finish being a rather full cast audio drama style format of thing, I just prefer those over these, because I think that you may as well just get other actors in to play the other characters, as opposed to sort of the two main protagonists playing the other characters as well and sort of telling the story from their perspective. However, this is a little bit different, because as I say, I've got two characters that I'm already invested in, and Trevor Baxter and Christopher Benjamin are both people that can play people incredibly well. They can play all these different personalities from the different classes in London. We've got sort of the mudlarks on the Thames, we've got the different police officers, we've also got the inspectors in there as well, and this is sort of a really nice sort of small introduction to Jago Litefoot. It's nothing big, it's got a quite nice story behind it as well, that is in fact sort of taken up upon in Series 1 also, and a sort of Series 2 to an extent as well. But yeah, it's sort of the birthplace of Jago Litefoot to show how powerful it is, and sort of presents, this is the story that we're going to tell, and this is the adventure that we're going to take you on. And that's why I think that this is a great way to start Jago Litefoot. The whole story is basically told by Jago Litefoot as they're sat down in the Red Tavern, getting drinks passed over every so often, sort of over evening, sort of looking over at the events and then telling it in chronological order. And what I like about this way of sort of telling the different stories is you actually get to know the story from the character's perspective. So you've naturally got Jago's very enthusiastic, sort of pantomime-esque, almost theatrical, of course, because it's a theatre, impresario, but you kind of get this character that is incredibly bounding, he's incredibly egotistical as well, and you think even just the slightest situations and he ends up being very over-dramatic over it. But then you've got Professor Litefoot on the other hand, that is very quiet, very reserved, and kind of very educational when it comes to his way of telling the story and saying how we have sort of the introduction to his pathology sort of career, as well in the way that he takes a look at bodies and does autopsies for the police, and a little bit of background to St Thomas's Hospital as well, which is a really nice sort of pilot piece for Jago Litefoot as a whole. Even if you've not listened or watched the Talons of Weng-Chiang even, I think that you can easily get into Jago Litefoot from this story. But that said, Talons of Weng-Chiang is a pretty decent story anyway that I definitely recommend watching watching at some point because it's just a really good iconic piece of Doctor Who history. But this episode is sort of one of those ones that goes into the main heart of Victorian London, where you've got the stereotypical crime going on, you've got your different gangs that are doing different things, and then the businessmen as well, and kind of businessmen using these gangs and criminals and sort of these mad scientists to be able to do their own plans and hatch their own evil schemes. And it is a rather sort of self-contained story, but that said, it has a lot of potential at the same time, and it definitely starts off this era of Doctor Who with a very big bang. In this story, we're introduced to a Victorian criminal called Jack Yeovil, who is basically the main ringleader of this criminal organisation, and he's been locked up in Newgate prison for quite a while, and he died a few months previous. However, one night when Litefoot was working in his morgue, some police inspectors come in and drop off a body in his mortuary, and it turns out that that body is in fact belonging to a criminal that died a few months ago. So it turns out that these criminals have in fact been harbouring the bodies of some wooden mannequins, and they're basically full-scale people that are full animatronic sort of puppets to an extent, that have been sort of controlled by a character called Dr Tulp, which, if you're somebody who's listened to my Jago Litefoot Series 1 review that will probably be coming soon, if you're sort of going back and watching this one first, then he's a character that is also in that series. So it is very unusual to in fact have this character that is pretty much being voiced by Trevor Baxter, and then you know later on down the line he's going to be fully cast as an actual character in the series, and a lot of life is actually going to be breathed into his character. And in fact, a really nice pilot to that idea and sort of to his criminal schemes and sort of getting money. And yeah, I think that this actual sort of a quite creepy idea of getting people's souls and then putting them within mannequins is quite sort of eerie. Essentially have these puppets with personalities, with feelings. However, at the same time, they can be locked in this room, and as soon as the puppets get destroyed, say by flames or something like that, then they get sent back to their old bodies. And due to their old bodies being the criminals that were in Newgate prison that died many, many years ago, it turns out that they in fact get sent back to their old bodies that are now buried underground. So you get to see this quite horrific scene, in fact, that is one of the criminals going back into their old dead body, and they actually described how all their skin was falling off their hands, and when they were trying to claw away at the coffin, sort of their skin was breaking away to reveal the bones underneath, and they felt very weak and very sort of baggy, like they were just disintegrating. And yeah, it was quite a gory sort of image that Andy Lane actually portrayed in that story, but at the same time it got my attention, and that is something that I feel is definitely important for this style of story, the visual storytelling, because you can't see what's going on, so it needs to be described. And I guess that is one of the main upper hands of the companion chronicles, because you literally have the character narrating what is going on. Beyond in the story, you get the idea that Litefoot is basically the character with all the organisation, all of the plans, because of course he gets his puppet and is rather sort of took by it. He's very intrigued by its carving and he's rather impressed by it, but this puppet in fact reawakes and just walks out of his morgue, so naturally he would be very curious about that, and he goes about his day investigating in sort of a way that any other official police officer would. This has kind of been inspired by the police officers that he works with on a day-to-day basis. And then on the other hand, you have Jago, who's this character that basically blunders into the situation. He gets sent a telegram by Litefoot to kind of help with this investigation, and the main way that he gets involved within the story is basically by accidentally tripping over in a factory and reawaking this big massive machine, and then it turns out that Litefoot ends up clashing with him near the very end of the story, and then by the very end of that they end up sitting down and having a drink and then retelling the whole actual drama sort of in the way that it unfolds. So I think that this is a really good way to actually establish the personalities of the two characters, and is quite a relaxed story at the same time, but does go to that quite daring area of sort of Victorian criminals and sort of criminal gangs, and the way that that has a lot of potential. I do love the way that very early on in the series they get this idea of sort of Victorian London and businessmen using their powers sort of for evil. And I think that my only main complaint for this story is the fact that it is a companion chronicle and not a full cast audio drama, because naturally it does miss out on certain interactions between different characters. You don't have Inspector Quick in there. Ellie doesn't really get that much running time either. You just get a little glimpse at her personality, which, presuming Lisa Bauman was probably just filling in for a random barmaid, and little did she know that she would be a massive character in the Jago Litefoot sort of spin-off in later series to come. But I think that that is the main issue with this, the fact that this is a two-piece sort of two-hander, and they tell it from their perspective, and it could have been achieved maybe a little bit better from being full cast, but that said, at the same time, that's how Jago Litefoot started, and I guess if this wasn't actually a very successful adventure, we may have not got Jago Litefoot as a series as a whole. So yeah, this episode is a very powerful one to start on, and I recommend it, especially for only $8.99 as well. If you are planning to get into Jago Litefoot, perhaps buy Series 1 first and listen to that, because that is only £20 and you get a full 4 adventures, and then go back and get this one as well for completest reasons and listen to it after, because yeah, it is a nice way to start the series, but not the strongest episode by any means. Thanks for watching this review. If you have any questions about this release, then please do leave them in the description below and I will reply to them at some point in the near future, along with any other questions that you may have about Jago Litefoot. Basically, my main aim is to try and get as many of you into Jago Litefoot as possible, because it is a series that I'm very passionate about. So stay tuned for the full series reviews coming very soon, firstly of Series 1 and Series 2, and then hopefully the series after that as well. And yeah, I guess I'll see you all in another Doctor Who review at some point in the near future also. Thanks for watching, I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.